Bonjour. So there are four kind of simple daily habits that I've been using over the last couple of years that have quietly transformed my life. Now, I could talk about how they've helped me get in control of my health, my finances, and improve my relationships. But honestly, it's like these four habits have all combined together to sort of slowly give me like daily wins, and stacked up over all of that time compounds into big kind of results. So in this video, I want to share with you like what these habits are. I've got my kind of notes here of how they've helped me, and so that I'm imagining if I was speaking to me a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, before I started uni, I would just be in a way better place, way faster. So what's the first habit? How does it work? Well, I was listening to one of my favorite entrepreneurs talk on a podcast earlier, Jesse Itzler. Now he's married to Sarah Blakely, who's CEO of Spanx. So this is a pretty powerhouse couple. And Jesse was telling the story about a time when he was deep into an ultra marathon and his brain was telling him to give up, right? And he's saying, you can't keep going. This is like a 50-mile race in terrible conditions. And the interviewer was asking Jesse, how did you keep going? And he said that he was running with like a former, I think he was like ex-Marine or something, who would ask him during the marathon, during this ultra marathon, like, how do you feel? And before Jesse could even have a chance to respond, this ex-Marine was telling him, no, you have to say, I feel outstanding. And obviously, you're not going to feel great when you're like 30 miles in and your brain's telling you to quit and your knees are hurting and your feet are aching. But every time this ex-Marine asked Jesse on in this run, how are you feeling? And Jesse goes, I'm feeling outstanding. Every time he gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that pushes him through to complete the race. And the lesson from that is that kind of what were you expecting the race to be like? What were you expecting a 50-mile race to be like? Were you expecting it to be easy? No, of course it was going to be difficult. Of course you were going to feel like giving up. Of course you were going to feel like, just quitting when it felt a bit painful. But obviously it was going to feel painful. And that's the same for like any big meaningful goal that you kind of have in your life, whether that is building a business, whether that's getting in shape, whether that's trying to find like a partner. Do you think that all of these goals are going to be easy and they're going to be handed to you on a plate? Or do you think that if you wanted to achieve these things, you were going to have to go through pain and suffering along the way? I don't necessarily want to go on a load of terrible dates and sit through awkward conversations, or even worse, like spend a lot of time with somebody and invest a lot of time just to find out they're not the person I think they are. But that's kind of a cost of entry in that goal of like having a successful relationship. So the point from all of that is, I guess it's kind of two things. But the first thing is like, you kind of need to expect that your goals are going to be a little bit difficult to achieve and you're not going to achieve them straight away. But the second thing, and the actual habit that I use to help me keep staying motivated towards doing these difficult things, is all to do with that self-talk. And it's all to do with how Jesse Itzler responded in that situation too. Because even when the going gets tough and people ask me how you doing? I always say, I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing amazing. I'm feeling great, and you got to look for things to be positive about. Because if something's going to be difficult, isn't it way easier to have way easier, but also way better for your mental health to have a positive mindset anyway? So it's like, I don't really want to be waking up at 5:30 in the morning, but I know that is so good for my mental health. So, I tell myself, if someone says, how are you feeling waking up in the morning? I'm like, fantastic, mate, this is amazing. And that over time impacts the actual results that you see in real life. Because as I always say to people, and myself really, I'm like, your thoughts are the most important thing you have in the world and the language that you speak into existence. And that the reason why is your thoughts dictate the beliefs that you have about the world. And those beliefs dictate the actions that you take. And obviously, whatever actions you take results in the quality of your life and the life that you currently live in. And think about it this way. If I had the thought of I'm not sure if people would listen to me on YouTube, or, I don't think I'm going to be good on camera, then that's going to impact the belief of I'm probably not going to be able to grow a YouTube channel. Then that impacts the action of if I had that belief, then I'm probably then not going to be trying to film. I'm not going to be scripting. I'm not going to think that I can sit in front of a camera. And obviously, I would never be in the situation I am now, where I help other people grow their YouTube channels and indeed have grown mine. So the kind of action step from that is whenever you have a moment of self-doubt, or you find yourself complaining, or you find yourself looking for the negative, you've got to completely just take a step back. And even if you don't feel like ultra positive, you've got to say something incredibly positive about the situation rather than dwell on the negative. And then over time, your brain is just going to focus more so on the positives, and that's going to keep you going down the line, because it's going to impact your beliefs, which is going to impact your actions. So that's habit one. Always speak positively about yourself and the environment. Now, habit number two is kind of to do with this silly little glass bottle of San Pellegrino sparkling water. Because like, I think some people would look at this and be like, why do you get like £2.50 bottles of water when you can get it for free, essentially, out of the tap? And this is something I've kind of found out recently, because I was always reluctant to spend the money that I would earn. I think it probably was because I had a bit of a scarcity mindset. But then one day I was like, you know what? What's the most valuable way to spend your money if it's not on experiences? Well, it's probably on your health. And for me, I get so much enjoyment out of drinking a lot of water, specifically sparkling water. So I'm like, I don't have any problem with spending money on my health, whether that's like sparkling water, whether that's like good quality steak, good quality food, because ultimately that in the long run is going to compound. As you know, you can see all the time, it's crazy. Like, but if you just look at somebody who's like 40 years old, for example, one person might look 50, the other might look 28, and it's all to do with the choices. It's mainly to do with the choices that they made in terms of how they live their life, what they ate, and all of their other sort of habits. So yeah, habit two is spend money frivolously, not frivolously, but spend money on health without thinking too much about it. Which brings us on to habit three. And recently I bought this kind of Oura ring, again, because it's spending money on my health. But the great thing about the Oura thing is that it tracks how many steps you do. And before, I was never doing like 2 steps a day, but I wasn't doing loads, because I was like, I have a bit of an office job. And I never thought that seeing the amount of steps you do each day, it could be like so strong as a visual cue. However, this Oura ring has an app that, like I said, tracks how many steps you do in a day. And that motivates me every single time to look at it. And I'm like, man, I want to get to that 10,000 number. But the actual habit, I suppose, has been shown to me by this Oura of just going on a walk every single day. Like, as much as you can, walk. It's not actually that hard when you think about it. Even if you drive, you can just park at like the opposite end of a car park, or, you know, if there's like stairs or a lift, you take the stairs. Even on the underground, like I always look at the people stood on the side of the escalator, and I'm like, why would you just not walk? Like, if you're like young and fit and capable, why would you not use that fitness that you have and just take the opportunity to walk? So this got one benefit in terms of the health, and I found myself like even now in the past few weeks of like taking this super seriously, of just getting leaner and my cardio feeling like it's improving and I'm getting out of breath less. But the second benefit of that is I find like what I do, I need to have good ideas, right? For the people that I work with, that's how you grow a YouTube channel, is with good ideas. But the weird thing is, if you've ever tried something like that before, where you sit down, you tell yourself that you want to be creative, nothing creative ever comes into your brain. However, it's in those moments of like downtime away from your laptop, away from the work, where at least I find I get all of the creative juices flowing. So like a walk is, and a daily 10,000 steps ideally, is not only amazing for your health, the way you look, the way you feel, but it's just it's probably the best thing I've ever done for my mental health, because it just, especially if you go out without your phone and without like your earphones or anything, you're just alone with nature, I always find I just come back with a clearer head. So that brings us on to the final kind of habit, which is equal parts a habit, but also kind of how I try to live my life. And this really hit home recently when I was chatting to like a couple of my mates, and they sort of see what I'm doing. You know, I'm making money online. I've got like the location freedom. I'm still at uni, but I've got like I feel very very grateful for the situation I'm in. And then they were also like inspired to try and do something similar, right? To try and make money online. And they told me like, oh, I think I can do this. I can make X amount of dollars in 3 months or whatever. And I'm like, okay, amazing. That sounds great. But like, that's probably not going to happen, right? That's a really quick time frame. And you've got a lot to learn. You've got a lot of like rejections to face, because I've been trying this to make money online for like the last 3 years. And basically ever since I started uni, and it's only really been in the past like few months, probably since November, December of last year, when I've really started to make what, at least to me, feels like a lot of money. So that took me like 2.5 years really to make anything work. And I think a lot of people maybe look at people who make money online and people that have like location freedom and stuff and think that it's easy, but it's not. You just have to kind of stick around for long enough. And unfortunately for like these two mates, they just kind of didn't get it. And even though I tried to help them out as much as I can and give them advice, at the end of the day, if you're not willing to stick with something for the long term and sacrifice your current like happiness and current comfort for the potential of success down the line, it doesn't even have to be money. It could be like, relationships, it could be fitness, whatever. Then you're not going to achieve success. And I just think these days so many people are unwilling to give up a little bit of short-term pleasure for long-term success. So how have I managed to stay committed? Well, habit number 4 is to constantly reflect on your goals. How do you do that? And why do you do that? Well, first, why do you do that? Because you might have heard this quote before. It's like oftentimes we drastically overestimate what we can do in a matter of months, but underestimate what we can do in decades. And whenever I look at some of the biggest, like, I guess, you would say probably like most successful people in the online space that I've like chatted with or heard of or just know the stories of, they always think in decades, and they always think, oh yeah, well, I'm going to try this for like a few years and see how it goes. I even remember chatting with James, and he was talking about like starting posting on LinkedIn. He was like, yeah, I'll probably give it like a year or two before making any real decisions about if it's worthwhile. And I think most people would look at that and be like, a year or two of not even knowing if you're going to make it a success? Like, that's insane. But obviously for these people and the successful people, they just know how much time it takes to make something a success. And at least for me, the reason why I find it easier maybe than others to do that and to have that long-term vision is that I keep a journal of all of what's going on in my head at different times. So I can look back basically anywhere over the last 3 years in one journal and look to see where my mind is at, look to see where my thoughts were. And that's not even just in the business, but that's in terms of like what I wanted out of life. At that point, was I like looking for a relationship, or where did I think I want to live? How many like kids did I think I want to have? Like, what did I think university would be like? And then when you track your life in this way and your goals, it gives you you can kind of connect the dots from reverse. And it's really I just find it really motivating to keep going. So anytime I've been like on the business journey, be like, oh, well, maybe like I just shouldn't keep going. I can look back at those entries from like 3 years ago and see how little motivated Ollie was writing about how he wanted in like a year's time to have this sort of result and have a life that looked like this, and then think, oh wow, this actually happened. And it's just like the most motivating thing in the world. So if you don't have a journal, I use a bunch, but like, this one's like a recent one, really cool. I really recommend doing it. And just, you don't have to journal every day or like every week, just whenever you have like a bit of inspiration, or if you're, I guess, sat down on a train or a bus in a new place, I find that's a really cool, inspiring time to write. It just keeps you going. It keeps you going through the tough times, and it reminds you that everything valuable and everything worthwhile is a result of days and days of wins stacked up over years. It's not, it's a lot of work. And I think a lot of people underestimate that and the amount of time it takes. So to recap, the 4 habits for Ollie from 2 years ago, 3 years ago before uni, what are they? overwhelmingly positive self-talk all the time. Like anytime you want to complain, anytime you want to look down across the world or think, oh, why is this happening to me? Completely just like take a step back and view the situation positively and say so. Even if you're feeling terrible and you're feeling tired, exhausted, and people ask, oh, how you doing? You go, I'm feeling outstanding. The second thing is spend the money that you get on health. That could be like gym clothes, that could be a gym pass, that could be run clubs, that could be sparkling water if that's your thing, good quality food, because that's just something that, you know, when you physically feel good, mentally, you can do your best work too. Habit 3 is just walk as much as you can. It's great for your mental health. It's great for your physical health and getting lean. And habit number 4 is try and keep a journal or some kind of way to track the progress towards your goals. And like, for me, I guess this is kind of what this little channel is. You know, I don't really think anybody's going to watch these videos, but I don't really care. Like, the goal of it, like I've said in a previous video, I kind of got 3 main goals for this. It's A, to get back into the flow of filming and talking to camera. Like, I've recorded the intro to this 6 times in a row before actually posting this, which is kind of insane. But to get back into the flow. B is to flex my creative muscle and to just see how many ideas I can keep coming up with every single day. 3, or C, I'm jumping between them now. 3 is to keep the habit, keep the streak. Like, I don't really want to film a video that much today. But I was like, oh, I've got to do it. I'm going to do it, which is kind of fitting with what we talked about. And then 4 is kind of just to, try and build some AI systems to make this process easier, to find out where the bottlenecks are. And 5, I think I said there were 3 things, but there's one more, is to kind of just document my life. Like, I don't necessarily know if I'll look back on these videos personally, but I just think like, I kind of treat it a little bit like I do with my journal, where it's like, oh, I can just kind of document what my thoughts are at different points in my life. And hopefully it will help some people if they watch, or, you know, I don't necessarily think they will, but anytime soon. Maybe as these videos get better in the future, it will change. But yeah, I think this is just a cool thing to look back on. Anyway, I'll stop rambling and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.